All right, so let's kick it off. Sebastian, who's our principal solution architect, is with me, and we're going to take you through this version, some really exciting stuff. So yeah, let's get the ball rolling, Sebastian.
With the new feature.
Yeah,
So this is super cool stuff because now what we can do is we can also store the data into archival storage within Azure. So obviously we already lowered the cost of backups, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But we also have the ability to actually store the data into archival storage within Azure. And this is really interesting stuff. We'll talk a little bit about money. What's the actual savings here? But you're going to find that the savings just by moving the data into data lifecycle management into Azure is going to be incredible. The cost savings, it's not just a regular discount, it's an absolute mic drop moment. So I think everybody's really going to enjoy this because let's face it, cost is really important. Nobody likes creating backups, but backups are super important. So having the ability to actually be more selective about where the data goes within your environment, and especially within Azure, is going to be really important as well.
yeah, that's I think one of the most interesting ones.
Yes, it's the hidden cost. So what I mean by that, by hidden cost, is if you take a closer look at Azure Backup is actually charged not by backup as you would think, but it actually charges you by the size of the instance. And one thing that I always find super interesting, these numbers that we're going to show you here, we didn't come up with these numbers. These numbers are actually on the Azure's website. So when you take a look at how much is it going to cost me to perform backups of my Azure resources, you'll find that they're going to charge you in certain price brackets based on the size of the instance that you're backing up. So the example that they give you on the Azure website is, what if I'm going to back up a 1.2 terabyte VM? This is what they're going to tell you. It's going to cost you $30. It's very difficult. There's actually calculations involved. Oh, it's $5. That's the base cost. And then we're going to charge you $10 per every 500 gig increment. So it's layer upon layer upon layer. And I have to get my calculator out to actually get to the final number. The final number is $30 for a 1.2 terabyte VM. Now, that's
Out,
not unusual.
out of curiosity, how many Azure users even know the size of the VMs?
That's a great question. I think it's very few. And why is that? Because, well, resources are always in motion. Things always change. What's the largest instance that you have currently in your environment? I can guarantee you that changes all the time. And within Azure, there's also not like one report that would tell me, hey, show me all of my resources in a certain order so that I can see how big they actually are. Because a lot of times when you have the IT team isn't necessarily the same team that also performs the backups. So that means the IT team is going to add volumes to it. So the size changes, or they just create whole new instances and their size again is in question. It always changes. So I think that's probably not something they're going to talk about much. In comparison now, let's take a look at what price difference is. N2WS charges you $5 per instance, and that's just sticker price. Makes absolutely no difference what the size of the instance itself is. So that is tremendous cost savings right there. Yes, there's also the retention with N2WS and retention with Azure. So obviously the cost of the backup itself, and we'll talk about how we can lower that cost as well. But this is just think of it like the entry fee in a club. This is how much it's going to cost you just to get into the venue.
Wow, that's tremendous savings.
And it's transparent. I mean, if you're a backup admin, what's the most important thing? Well, one of the most important things is going to be your budget. And you want that to be easy. You want that to be transparent because if I have to guess what my backup is, so when my CFO is going to ask how much is it going to cost us this year, oh, I don't know. It depends. All depends on what the
Yeah.
difference is between the data sizes. So now this is just step number one. Essentially, now we're in the bar and we're in the club. So this is how much Azure is going to charge you just to participate in the privilege to perform backups. So if you have a 1.2 terabyte instance, it's going to cost you $30 right into the gate. Now let's talk about archival storage. So archival storage, you're really limited what Azure allows you to do. You have no real control of when the data is going to go into archival, when is the data in hot, which is the snapshots. So that's completely different with N2WS. So N2WS, as per usual, gives you options. So that means that we allow you to actually have an archival storage tier that's incremental. That's one thing. And also that you're in control of where the archival data goes and how long we're going to keep it there.
Is everything here, like all these backups are immutable?
Ah, I see. Yes, absolutely. You've been doing your homework, haven't you? With the immutable backups, that's on everybody's mind. It's ransomware protection. How can I make sure that the data not only is cost effective, but also that the data is immutable? And the answer is, and I'll show you that later because I'll actually show you the live product, the data also can be made immutable as well. All right, let's move on. So the next part is kind of spicy. It's Wasabi. We also have now options as far as storage itself is concerned for Wasabi. And again, we're not talking about the sushi kind, even though that would be highly delicious. So this is, in case you don't know about Wasabi yet, and I know it's going to be your best friend, this is S3 compatible, lightning fast, dirt cheap storage that finally answers the age-old question, what if backups were actually affordable and didn't take a sabbatical when you needed them fast? So now you can automate archiving straight to Wasabi because your backups deserve better than slow and expensive, right?
And how complicated is it's everything is going to be with scheduling and retention policies and all that? How's it going to happen?
Well, that's a good question. So now that we have some options, and this is what you're seeing here on the screen right now. So this is really one of the banner mottos that we have at N2W, that we want to give you options. We want to make it granular. You're in control. You don't have to take whatever a vendor, a cloud vendor is telling you you should be using. So this is really the future because it gives you the ability to choose, pick and choose what you want to store and where you want to store it. Because let's face it, we do the same thing with food, right? I mean, with my kids, one kid likes the more healthy options. The other kid, it's the boy who doesn't like the healthy options. So how easy is it to actually implement this? And this is the interesting part because you can make changes to your backup strategy right now very easy with 4.4. You're not going to lose anything. You're not going to start from scratch. So you can choose right now. You can say, even if you've made the choice to archive previously into Amazon S3, or if with the last version you made the choice, oh, I'm going to store this outside of my regular cloud provider, I'm going to store it in Azure Blob. But now that we have Wasabi, you don't have to start over. It's just simply a tick box where you choose, oh, now going forward, I'm just going to use Wasabi.
Yep.
Very easy.
I think, from a broader spectrum or even vision spectrum for N2W, I think this is it's been a very exciting, addition to the product. I think that kind of where we're going with this, and you just touched upon it like a few minutes ago, is kind of the ability to have a lot of options to decide where you want to store the data. And I think, we're continuing that vision and add more and more and more targets. I'm curious, like, how does that affect the savings when you're using Wasabi?
Tremendously. Absolutely tremendously. So I actually had some conversations with customers previously where they said exactly what I said. Nobody likes creating backups, but we have to. So if we're talking money, and I always like talking money because that's really where it's at. How is it going to affect the bottom line? How is it going to affect the backup budget? So some rough numbers, absolutely rough numbers. If you store 1 terabyte of data in regular storage, hot snapshot storage, it's going to cost you about $52 per month.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you take that same amount of data and you store it into one of the archival storage, it's going to be a lot more affordable. It's going to be for 1 terabyte of data about $12. And it's about the same. Doesn't matter if you're in AWS, if you're in Azure. The different cloud providers are kind of sort of the same as far as archival is concerned. So once again, 52 for the whole shebang, about $12 in archival. Now enter Wasabi. And Wasabi is about $7 per terabyte.
Wow.
So that's big savings compared to the big cloud providers because Wasabi is spicy and they want to make a difference.
Yeah, which brings me to the next question. Let's say if I'm a customer, I have an environment, like how big my environment needs to be for Wasabi to make sense? Like, is it for the bigger enterprises, medium, small, kind of?
So it's interesting that you went that route because in my head I was thinking, okay, I can throw out some numbers. So 1 terabyte, $7 for Wasabi. You're absolutely right. So this is just if you have a small environment. If you have a large environment, my suggestion is talk to Wasabi because, like I said, they want to make a difference. They're competing against the big cloud providers, and Wasabi is going to make a difference in your budget as well. I would say it starts with small environments, small companies, all the way to the huge ones that back up tens of thousands of instances and resources.
Awesome. Can't wait to see the demo though.
Yes. So Wasabi, hot, cold, archive, immutable, cross cloud, it's all there. All right. Recovery. Of course, we have the one-offs, right? Oh, I need to bring back one server. I need to bring back certain files and folders and all of that. But recovery scenarios is really the important one because recovery scenarios gives you the ability to, well, bring back everything all at once. So we made some changes there as well. The important ones is if you want to fail over your entire environment. Yeah, okay, there's an outage. I can do this. One click, it's done. And if I want to perform testing with the recovery scenarios, I can do that as well. So it can actually test if everything is going to be up and running if I need it. But what about failback? Sometimes people forget about the failback. Yeah, I can perform a failover. And then once the crisis has been mitigated, I can perform a failback of everything back into my original region. I could go the route of saying everything that you find there, I want it back in the original region. Yeah, I could. But let's face it, not all data changes. Some data is completely always the same. Web pages, they're not going to change. So what we can do now with the recovery scenarios is custom tags. What that means is when we perform a failover, I can be very selective what should be added to the resources. So as somebody goes into the club, so to speak, to stay with our example here, we're going to give them hand stamps. And based on if they should be able to get into the next room during a failback, we can change what we're going to tag on those. So this is really important as well. Smart retries. That's an important one as well, because one of the big impacts on your cloud backup budget is not having to perform backups that you don't actually need. What am I talking about? Well, let's say there is an outage within a region. Well, what's going to happen is if there happens to be a cloud outage during a backup, it's going to negatively impact how it's going to report on this. Oh, there was a region down and I couldn't perform a backup, or an instance was actually removed. It wasn't brought back up yet. So all of those are going to fail. So does that mean I'm going to have to do the entire backup again? What about all the resources that I already performed the backup of? If you have a policy which has 3 resources, it's not going to affect you that much. But anytime when you go above 5, 10, 500, 5,000 resources, if you need to rerun a backup of 5,000 resources because 3 resources failed, that's going to have an impact, right? Yeah. So that's why we now support smart retries. So this means if any resource within a backup policy fails during a backup, we're going to go in, we're going to report on that. And then we have the ability to very granularly re-perform a backup of just the resources that have failed. A huge difference.
Yeah, I remember a few customers had that request. Yeah, for sure.
Also because, well, some of the native tools don't support that either because they're not really designed to help you save money. Ultimately, they're not serving the customer. Ultimately, they're serving the cloud provider because the cloud provider says, yeah, more money for me if we're creating more backup. All right, now, advanced snapshot tech. This is all the way under the hood, all the way under the hood. The only way you're going to find out about this those new features, as far as the snapshot tech is concerned, the only way you're going to find out about it is if you take a look at your invoice, at your cloud provider invoice. Everything changes. Tech is constantly in motion. So that means even the cloud providers themselves, AWS, Azure, they make changes to their APIs. Previously, long time ago, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, you had to send hundreds of API calls in order to perform a backup of a single resource. And then they cut that in half, and now they once again cut that in half as well. So if you don't change the underlying structure, how you're using the cloud native tools, the APIs, well, then you leave money on the table. So that's why we now change the way we interact with the resources to the absolutely most up-to-date way to interact with those resources. Huge difference. You're not going to see it in the console, but you're going to see it at the end of the month within your invoice for your cloud provider. So all the slides in the world, I'm going to tell the real story. I always love demos. So this, what you're seeing here on the screen, that is actually version 4.4. So some of the things that we're going to talk about. So the first one is long-term archival. How does that work? So if I go into one of my backup policies, and I'm going to go into one of my Azure backup policies. So over here, you're going to see lifecycle management. So nothing has changed here. So you're still selecting what resources should be backed up. You can do this with a graphical user interface, click this button, or you can also select the resources using tags, probably what you're going to do in an environment, in a production environment. But then lifecycle management, that's where you're going to choose, okay, so how long are we keeping the data? Now you also have the ability not only to define how many generations of data do you want to keep, but we also have the ability to choose, well, how many days do I want to keep this? So this is really important as well. So this isn't just the generations. Keep thinking about this. We can also choose the days. So not necessarily you're performing a daily backup. Maybe you're performing 18 backups a day in weird intervals. So let's say I'm performing hourly backups, but I'm not going to perform any backups outside business hours. Okay, so then I'm probably going to do what, 18, 16 backups a day. Well, then if I only keep 16 generations, I might be missing out on things. So that's why we now have the ability to also choose the time interval as far as times is concerned. The next one that's really exciting, especially for our Azure customers, is this button right here, Use Storage Repository. So what that does is it moves the data out of the hot storage. Yes, I know hot sounds great, but it's good for food, but you also shouldn't eat your food too hot. That's what my grandma always said. It's exactly the same with the data. So you move the data into more affordable storage. And this is what you're going to do. Just simply toggle this box. And then you can choose, well, how long do you want to keep the data in archival storage? And you can even choose, well, when do I want to start putting the data? So theoretically, what you could say is you could say, I'm going to keep the data for 12 months. So why not just keep a certain number of backups in the hot snapshot? That's that near instant recovery. And then maybe after the first 7 days, then I'm going to go into archival storage where it might take seconds longer. And down here, this is where you can then choose, well, how do I want to store this? Because I have different target repositories. This could be in Azure, or little preview, we're also going to talk about the ability to store that data in Wasabi as well. So that's the difference that we have. Now, the next one is, and this is an important one as well, having the ability to put that data into a completely different cloud provider. So now we have the ability to use the storage repositories within Azure. So we use blob storage, but we now also have the option to use Wasabi. How do I implement this, and what difference does it make? So under the storage repository, you just simply click on New. Over here, this is where you choose Wasabi storage repository. You will need two items. So you need to be able to provide us with the information about which account to use and which bucket to use within Wasabi. You can implement this in less than 5 minutes. You probably think I'm exaggerating, but just simply go into Wasabi, create a bucket, and then create an access key for us. That's how easy it is. That's all you need. Just simply an access key, and then we can dip into Wasabi and perform backups off the data into Wasabi. Now, the other thing, so implementing this 5 minutes. Now, how can I make use of the Wasabi storage? So let's go back into our backup policy. I go into lifecycle management. And now instead of using my Azure storage, I can just simply use my Wasabi repo instead. Now you're probably wondering, okay, so but what if I already used S3? What if I already used Azure? And then how can I make that change? Do I have to start from scratch? And as I mentioned, no, not at all. Just simply make the change right here. So whatever you used previously as your storage repository, just simply choose Wasabi. Going forward from that moment on, we're going to start using Wasabi. So if you go into your backup monitor, nothing changes. You're still performing your backups. Your backups are still going to be running. And just from that day forward, we're then going to perform the archival into your chosen storage tier. In this case, it would be Wasabi. And the data is going to age out in the old archive just as it does before. So implementing Wasabi from one day to the next, super easy. Very easy. 5 minutes to set up the Wasabi account, maybe another, 60 seconds, 120 seconds to make the change within the policy, and you're back in business. The other one that we talked about was the recovery scenarios. So let me show you how this works, because this is a really important one. So over here are my recovery scenarios. Of course, we talked so many times about how important these recovery scenarios are, because not only can I automate the failover of resources, no, I can also schedule them, and I have a bunch of different options for the scheduling of the testing of those resources. But let's not talk about this today. Today, what I'm going to talk to you about is how you can set up the recovery of the resources, and at the same time make it absolutely clear which resources have been failed over. The way you do this is click on Configure, then click on Advanced Options. And this is the new feature. This is really important, because now I can change the tags that are going to get assigned to the resources. Yes, we reserve the tags, obviously, because you probably have department, cost center, data owner, application stack, all of those. Yeah, you want those. But now what I can do is I can add additional tags to the resources. So then if I use a new tag, okay, so let's say I'm going to make it recovery. And very simple, I'm just going to say yes. So now all of the resources that I'm recovering are going to have a new tag on it. That's a recovered resource. So guess what? Now what I can do is, in order to perform a fail back, how can I search for the resources that have been failed over? Well, just simply with that recovery tag. And guess what? I can also add multiples. Oh, do I want to tag that this is a recovery? Yes. Can I also tag that if I want to fail this back, that's a resource that I actually want to transport back? Yeah, I can do that as well. So this, even though it looks very simple, this is going to add so much granularity to the ability to test resources, fail over resources, and then fail back only the resources that I actually want to do, and completely automated. So there is no more need to do this in many different steps, and it's just absolutely crazy. Nobody wants to do that. Then one more thing, and this is, I always like to do this when we do these um, these different videos. One thing that we added, and we didn't even add that to the slides themselves, but I'll show you how this works, is if you go to the server settings, go to security and password, login session expiration. That's an interesting one because it adds to the security. So when I have a web portal, I want to make sure that if I authenticate to that web portal and I walk away, even if I log my workstation, well, the session shouldn't stay open forever. So now you can choose, hey, if I log in and I don't do anything on that session, I wanted to lock the portal after 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 60 seconds. If I don't keep moving around, I want to lock this. This is the feature that will do this. So server settings over here, general settings, security and password. This is where you can choose when the session will be locked if nothing will change. One last thing, the ability to retry only the resources that you want to retry. So this might be something that you don't want to turn on. It is obviously a big cost savings, but just in case you don't want to turn this on, you don't have to change anything. So we're not going to change this for you. Again, you're in control. You have the choice if you want to do something within the product. So over here, this is where you make that choice. Under more options within a policy, you can then implement that new feature where we will only retry the failed targets. Because some companies do have a requirement where something fails, everything needs to be done. Why? Because of application stacks. I need to make sure that all of the different resources are still in sync. But if that's not the case, that's where big savings are waiting for you because you're just retrying the failed backups. You don't have to do everything all at once again.
Okay, I think we're at the end. So, Sebastian, thank you so much for walking us through this. It was a really pretty significant changes to the product with the data lifecycle management in Azure. Probably going to bring a lot more questions, strategies. We know that there's a big discussion going on multi-cloud backups and stuff.
Mhm.
And we already had some discussions with customers, so it opens up an entire new world for the Azure side, not to mention the Wasabi, which kind of adds another target. So yeah, I mean, we're super excited to launch this. Give us your feedback, ask questions. We're here for you. I think there's one more slide in the deck, and this is kind of give you a heads up. So we're gonna be doing something super exciting. May 8th, there's going to be a virtual event called Ditch the Drama, where we're going to be hosting some industry leaders that probably most of you know for a session that will kind of give you a lot of tips and tricks on how to reduce drama in your lives. Stay tuned for that. Lots of prizes they're going to be there, and a few very cool surprises. Again, Sebastian, thank you. And we're going to see you actually probably in the next one, which is going to be an AWS one. And yeah, looking forward to it. Feel free to ask questions. We're here for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.